Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this first series of episodes of our brand new podcast that we have called Talking Tech and Social Change, which is a common good perspective of technology. In Thoughtworks, we are really excited to host this podcast and share this space with passionate technologists, activists, citizens who really care, who are thinking, acting right now in this intersection between technology and social change. I will first introduce myself. I am Eduardo. I am the Global Head of Social Change in Thoughtworks. I will be your host in this incredible journey, making questions for our guests, trying to go deep into the thoughts and trying to develop this discussion so we can build together a better understanding of how our world is changing, our challenges, how we are facing this digital revolution we are living right now. As I was telling you, we will be doing a first series of episodes that we have been thinking as an introduction. So all of this will be kind of introduction, a high-level discussion on what we think is the intersection between technology and social change. And that is why we have invited today to talk with us Elise Zelechowski. She is the Global Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, Sustainability and Social Change in Thoughtworks. So thank you very much, Elise, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this podcast.
Yeah, me too. So first, and something I'll always like to do is let's start our discussion by you telling us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, what has been your journey? What's your background? How came you to this point of thinking this intersection between technology and social change?
Yeah, so I came to technology having spent many years working in the nonprofit sector in the Chicago area in the U.S. I was really doing way more kind of hands-on community development and policy work, particularly in the environmental and climate space. And I'll tell you, technology was not something I thought about very much, at least in the sort of the way we're talking about it today in terms of the software, the internet, sort of the sort of digital technology tools. But right, there's so many ways to sort of define technology and think about technology, in terms of relationships, in terms of the ways in which communities interact. And what I realized was that the world was changing very rapidly around me, and I didn't understand enough about how digital technologies were impacting social movements and the kind of work specifically that I was doing. And I got very interested in Thoughtworks and very interested particularly in the mission that Thoughtworks had to work with social movements and the way Thoughtworks engaged in those relationships, which were, seemed to me as an outsider to be very focused on, depth and multi-year sort of community and relationship building, and really designed to ensure that tech was a part of a social movement strategy, not just kind of a transactional component or a tool that was picked up to advance, some part of the movement strategy. And so I was also coming from a background where I focused on workforce development. I was also really interested in how the sort of growing digitization of things was going to impact the workforce, and particularly people who were underemployed or unemployed or who didn't have access to some of the STEM education that really propels people into technology jobs. What did that mean for them and their access to wealth? And just general access to opportunities as more of those jobs, right, required those skills. So I was excited to kind of really dig in and kind of bring the perspectives that I had working in the community development and policy space to a technology context, and kind of bridge that gap between activists and organizers and technologists, so that we could create more holistic strategies for social movement work.
And building a little bit on that and your personal experience, let's say, and let's bring that to a little more high level analysis that you're having right now on this in our society. How how do you see these challenges that tech is bringing to the whole society? I mean, you talked a little bit about how you felt that from that position that you had in one moment in the nonprofit sector and with movements. And now that you have been already in the tech industry too, and you have this other perspective, how do you see the main challenges that technology is bringing to our society? I mean, from this perspective of economic and social justice lens, right? Of this lens that you have been building.
Yeah. I think right in the early days of the internet, there was a lot of tech utopianism, right? This sort of idea that the internet was going to change the world for good, right? And it would solve a lot of the problems that we experience, in our day to day. Internet would lead to a more democratic society. It would give people access to all of this information, that beyond sort of what they could find, in the library or, in their home. To educational opportunities. You could connect to anyone, anywhere in the world. Like, what an amazing vision, right? And that it would globalize us in this really positive way, right? We would go beyond the sort of geographic, limits of our immediate environment and learn about other cultures and engage more deeply. And some of that, has proven, of course, to be true. But, the internet is not separate from the dynamics of our society, right? It's a microcosm, right? It sort of it reflects the challenges, the politics, the interpersonal dynamics, and in some cases exacerbates, some of the more complicated dynamics that we experience in society. Social media is a great example of that, and the way in which it has, created kind of a skewed perspective, right, of of our reality. Based on this idea that, like, when you're using social media, right, your experience is like, this is the world. And what you're not realizing is that the social media platforms have decided to, based on algorithms and a whole bunch of other things, right? Like, sort of, this is only the part of the world that you'll see. It's the way in which, search engines make you feel like you're able to kind of go anywhere on the internet, but they control where you go, right? And so there's a kind of an interesting dynamic here where we have the perception that we're getting, like, the key to, like, all of this knowledge and all this diversity on the internet, but it is heavily curated for us, right? And that's where we've, seen the issues around, some of the interference, right, and elections, and some of the ways in which, social media has led to some really sort of unfortunate, political dynamics. But I think that, we have to really step back and ask ourselves, questions about how is the internet, how is technology serving us, and what guardrails do we need to put into place to make sure that the internet is serving that vision, right? We have to think about, the internet and the software that we're building as infrastructure, and understand that there's no such thing as, right, a tech utopia, that we have to constantly be vigilant and asking, who decided what information I'm seeing? How is my data being used? It's a constant sort of set of questioning that we have to do, and it can be exhausting, but it is a requirement, I think, as technology evolves faster and faster, and platforms get bigger and bigger, that we really sort of maintain that view, that lens, and really make sure that we're being vigilant.
To that point, I always, when I speak with anyone, I always try to represent that in terms of the fact that new technologies are kind of territories, right? When we are in Facebook, we are in a search engine, we are walking into a territory that allows us to do things, not other things. And the fact is that what you mentioned, right? Like tech utopianism very often gives us this idea that this is always accessible for everyone, that this is magically a good thing for everyone. And this doesn't let us ask the good questions that you were mentioning. And to that point, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned this term many times, like take utopianism. What is that for you? I mean, how would you describe that to someone who has never heard this term before? Because it seems that it's something very important, right? A challenge we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the people who who invented and came together and sort of conceptualized the internet and as we know it, as I said earlier, really did have this vision that the internet was going to be this kind of this tool, this sort of opportunity to level the playing field, right? That because, and in many ways, I mean, anyone can get their music published. Anyone can, right? Sort of like people who have no political background can go from, having a strong opinion about something to being a candidate. I mean, it is like the way in which it has democratized sort of people's ability to have their voice heard. I mean, that is a big deal. But I think we need to sort of really understand, like, the sort of the idea of a utopia, right, is that, it's that it is going to solve, right? There's going to be like a holistic kind of overhaul of everything that is problematic, right? It's a view that there's like a certain like a state of perfection. And the problem is that you have all these different dynamics at play, and you have all these sort of dynamics that are mimicking the same challenges we have, in the concrete world. And so until we really understand how to bring that framework, a policy framework, and put it in place to address the things that are hidden from us in terms of their structures, but very visible to us in terms of how the impacts and outcomes play out, in the day-to-day, we're going to continue to see, I think, almost a dystopia, right? In the sense of like, it's very much going in a different direction than it was intended to. And I mean, I think any concept of a utopia is problematic because I think it's not dealing with the sort of, the realities of human nature and sort of all the different things that you need to kind of look out for. And I think we just have to be extremely careful that we don't kind of go into any kind of technology project, any kind of software, any kind of app that we're building with the notion that it's going to be this, this is going to save us in any way. And I think that is something, just working with social movements a lot and nonprofit organizations, NGOs around the world. I think this is probably one of the conversations, right? We have the most is about making sure that there is an underlying sort of agreement or an understanding that the technology that we can build together can serve a purpose. But it's not going to address some of the people problems that are just inevitable as a part of a social movement. And, we look to the social movement partners we're working with to help us understand how those dynamics are playing out and how they may impact the use of the software and how they should be thought of, in the context of how the software is designed. But I think, there is a sort of a continued idea that an app or that a technology might solve a bigger structural problem that is just not the case. It's a tool that thoughtfully built over time to support a broader movement strategy can be extraordinarily impactful, but we have to really be honest and realistic about the constraints, right? And sort of how it fits into a larger system of change and levers that we need to pull to enact that change.
So, and now that you're speaking about these two things, right? In one side is like abandoning this idea of tech utopianism. So that means putting the right questions on the table and that means like in a certain way, seeing what are the power dynamics in technology and thinking about, okay, how do we want to change the power dynamics? And you also mentioned that for doing so, we partner with social movements, right? So my next question would be, I have seen, and we have all seen this way of framing this, which is we want to amplify the positive social change work that our partners are doing. This is something that in Thoughtworks is very deep embedded in the why, in the way in which we work. And what I wanted to ask you is, we very often, when it comes to social change, we have been taught in our schools, in our colleges, that history is this kind of succession of very smart people coming together and making declarations of independence, declarations of rights, giving social rights. But in fact, when we go a little bit deeper and we saw from the critical social studies or from the work that historians have done, we see that history doesn't happen that way, right? It happens with resistance, with building alternatives, with people getting together in collective ways to make this change. So I wanted to ask you, in this sense, putting that together in this sense of amplifying the positive social change work of others, right? What does that mean for you? Why we are speaking about that, about this thing on amplifying? Where does that put the tech industry and the technologists in all this process? What is the role that you think we can have in that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Eduardo. I think when we look at kind of where we have some of the most powerful levers as technologists at Thoughtworks to help social movements really achieve their vision, or a series of visions as they iterate over time, it's the infrastructure that is so important, right? And it is our job as technologists to think about how the digital infrastructure that movement might benefit from is designed. And this is not something that we can do in a transactional way. And this is why we're so committed to partnerships that are long-term and sort of really digging in and thinking about multi-year strategies, because it really does take time to design that infrastructure in a thoughtful, equitable, accessible, scalable way. And what we do as technologists is really help kind of shape those tool sets for our social movement partners to allow them to do their work. And that is the amplification. For us, that is the quiet work of really making sure that they have what they need to be successful. That is the role that we can play as people who are committed to social impact. We can also get out there and the streets and share our voices. There are many ways to participate, in social change. But as technologists, I think we have the opportunity and the responsibility to design these tools as thoughtfully as possible. And I think one of the more sort of recent examples where I see this play out, is, with the war in Ukraine. And I think, there is always in crisis, there is a desire to be helpful. And I think that is, such an important response. And it's what brings us together. And it allows us to really think about sort of not only how we can help in this moment, but we are, I think, required to think about what is the sort of like infrastructure, the systems problem, right, that has led us to this moment. And we do have a responsibility to think, okay, what is going to address an acute need, but what is the work that needs to be doing? What is the work that we need to be doing, every day to build the infrastructure to support this community that is in this moment experiencing crisis, but there is going to be a long tail, or there will be a long road, to recovery or to sustainability or to whatever, sort of more stable state. that group or that community, needs to get to. And so I think that, whether you're talking about building tools for social movements that are trying to solve, structural, complex problems, or you're talking about, acute crisis, humanitarian crisis moments, we need to be thinking holistically. We need to be thinking beyond that moment and really looking at, okay, what are the sort of underlying conditions and how does technology, need to be built so that it can support kind of a longer term strategy. I think it's a very important lens that we need to bring to any sort of social situation as technologists.
And yeah, building on what you're saying, Elise, I think that there is something that I know that we have already touched a lot of the points I wanted to discuss with you today, but there's one point in particular that I really couldn't finish this discussion without taking that. I have seen you talk about this many times, about this value about thinking solidarity over charity when working with social movements. And this makes me a lot of things you were saying about this idea of long partnerships, about thinking systemic issues and not only like some urgency needs that makes us feel good, but really thinking social change in a deep way, right? So I just wanted to ask you, when you speak about this principle of solidarity over charity, what do you mean? How would you explain that to the people who are hearing us?
Yeah, I think in its most like simple terms, it's about sort of a horizontal relationship versus a vertical one. And it's looking at the relationship with a lens of power dynamics and making sure that, when you are responding or sort of, stepping up to address a problem, that those power dynamics are really checked, and that you are, as a technologist in this case, letting a partner lead. And really sort of guide you in the strategy. I think human-centered design is a very kind of nice sort of design concept, that I think that embodies a lot of those values, that we're really making sure that, in any situation, we're thinking about, who the users are and what they need. But and centering them. But I think, more broadly, I think this question of systemic versus transactional, I would argue that is kind of the solidarity over charity sort of like dynamic at play, which is, showing up, doing something, sort of a quick interaction is not going to really kind of get at the broader change work that needs to happen, right? And so I think the solidarity work really is the systemic work. It's been at the table for a long time. It's getting to know the organizations and the people and really being kind of a partner in the process, so that as the social movement strategy develops, the technology can develop with it, right? And the solutions evolve and the infrastructure evolves and grows and changes inevitably. And I think as technologists, we have to bring that solidarity mindset. And so, when we are approaching an organization that says, we don't have a lot of resources, but we need an app, can you build us something? We step back and we say, let's look at kind of, really what you're trying to build. And just because we're really good at building custom software doesn't mean we're going to go and build you something custom, right? We're going to step back and say, what are the tools that we can leverage that are, software as a service, that have, infrastructure and support, that are open source, that have communities around them, that are constantly evolving. How do we sort of bring those together to bring you the best solution, so that we don't burden you unnecessarily with the maintenance of all this tech. So I think, in terms of if there's one takeaway, for today, that I want people to think about, it's making sure that we are really asking the right questions, and thinking about how we take a longer view, one that is systemic and solidarity in nature in terms of how we engage with our social change partners, because that is how we're really going to make larger change together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Elise, for sharing with us these thoughts. It has been a great discussion. I hope that the people hearing that, technologists, activists, of anyone have developed some of those questions that they can use tomorrow when thinking of that. I think that in this moment in history with technology and digital technologies are changing totally our society, having this idea and this acknowledgement of the responsibility that tech industry has, that the technologies have in this change of building tomorrow makes this space and this discussion so much valuable. So thank you very much, Elise, for this.
Thank you.
And just for the people who are hearing this is one of the episodes. We have a whole series of episodes that are discussing this introduction to tech and social change. We will be discussing responsible tech. We will be discussing digital public goods, digital rights, many other topics that are this kind of introduction to what technology and social change means. So thank you very much, everyone, for being with us today. Thank you very much, Elise, for all the people also who help us to build this podcast, who are invisible to this discussion, but have been with us, Kevin, Katie, and everyone. Thank you very much for this. And we will be seeing all of you very soon for the next episodes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.